I said this after last week, that we can't have an honest conversation about Bryce Young because the team around him is not very good. Offensive line has regressed. The guys that they went and got to be wide receivers were, as Lauren Brownlow so eloquently put it, these are flex position guys for your fantasy football team. They don't have Tyreek Hill, who's probably the MVP of the first 3 weeks of the NFL season, based on what we've seen so far out of the Miami Dolphins. You know, Tua Tagovailoa is a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but he has weapons, and they've designed something. We know what their identity is.
Yeah.
And their identity on offense is so good with speed that they couldn't even help themselves dropping 70 on the Denver Broncos. Remember, Mike McDaniel in this game took guys out, and they could have gone for the record, but they knelt instead of kicking a field goal. That's how badly things went for the Denver Broncos this weekend, as they dropped 70 on the Denver Broncos. But the Dolphins, as I talked about last week, built to get to this point. So you're screwed in terms of your first round picks because you used them to get Bryce Young. So they could be bad this year. What are they going to do?
Could have the top 2 picks in the draft.
Think about that, right?
Number 1, number 2.
Think about that. So that's where the Bears are more interesting as a bad team. The Panthers don't even have that. But people were looking at Andy Dalton, the offense, looking like it was getting better. No, the wide receivers were doing a better job than what we have seen over the first 2 weeks of the season. James Data over at SB Nation pulled this stat. First game of the season where Thielen is over average on separation and he's cooking. Shark is close to average. Shockingly enough, when your wide receivers can create some separation, look what happens. You can actually do some things on offense. The tape eaters, the people who watch the All 22, the NFL Plus All 22, and they take the screen grabs, they went through a lot of plays in the loss to the New Orleans Saints on Monday night. And every single one of those screen grabs, it was what's Bryce Young supposed to do here? Like I say, look at the play, look at the wide receivers, look at how they're covered. What's Bryce Young supposed to do here? And Bryce Young, for the most part, had been doing pretty well with the lack of windows, the lack of opportunities. He was completing these passes best he could. So Andy Dalton looked a little bit better because guess what? The wide receivers are doing a little bit better job creating separation. So all of this is to say, in a big picture view, the problem isn't Bryce Young. The problem isn't Bryce Young was the wrong pick. Dude, Bryce Young's not the problem. He's not. Unless you want to subscribe to this conspiracy theory. You want to get into the conspiracy theory?
Yeah. Hit me with this conspiracy theory. I like those.
Do we know where Bryce Young got hurt in Monday night? Do we know that yet?
I don't think so.
Like, do we know the play where it happened? Has anybody explained how it is that Bryce Young completed that game, actually looked pretty good at the end of the game? They got some garbage time yards, and then all of a sudden, he's out 1 to 2 weeks without even so much of a report that he's testing it out. I didn't get a single Schefter. I didn't get a single Joe Person. I didn't get a single JJ. Bryce Young has to be taken off the field because he really wants to play this weekend. I think, again, this is conspiracy mode here. I think the Panthers have come to the realization, oh man, we suck. And it's entirely possible that we're going to ruin the development of Bryce Young in front of a crap team with an offensive line that's regressed and wide receivers that have not cashed the way we thought it was going to go. So that's conspiracy number one.
Okay. Let me just state for the record, as I have multiple times since
I know
Georgia played Alabama.
I know.
Excuse me. Ohio State basically beat Georgia and just didn't win the football game.
Sure.
I think CJ Stroud should have been the number 1 overall pick in this draft.
Fine.
And what I've seen so far has not changed my mind.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean Bryce Young can't be a good quarterback in the NFL. I'll just say it again. He's not a guy. I don't think he's a guy who's going to win games for you. If you're sitting here saying he needs Tariq Hill, he needs Jalen Waddle, he needs everything else, well, then he's not a difference maker. And it's hard to be the number 1 overall pick and not be a difference maker. That's just hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a conspiracy, by the way, to say that they're trying to protect him now
under the guise of an ankle injury.
Whatever they're doing. I actually think Bryce Young might have been better off as a Mahomes.
Yeah.
You know, remember, he's supposed to be the pocket Mahomes.
But again, that gets back
Mahomes
to identity.
Didn't play.
That gets back to identity.
Alex Smith played.
Remember,
Mr. Average played.
Gets back to the identity. They said in the offseason, they want him to play all 17 games. All 17. if you had sold it that we brought Andy Dalton in to set things up for Bryce Young to take over in the future, because we're going long term
to Tagovailoa.
Yes.
Because they had Fitzmagic there, and then they unleashed Tagovailoa.
Ryan Fitzpatrick was essentially the football equivalent of a baseball relief pitcher. That's what he was.
Yeah.
When they actually took Tua out in situations that were a little too much for him, in game-winning situations, and people screamed. But I got what they were trying to do. Oh, you're slow walking Tua into these situations. You're trying to develop for the long-term run. And they stuck to it. They stuck with it. And what are we seeing pay off so far in the early season with the Miami Dolphins?
Unbelievably so.
All right. Which gets back to the conversation we had about the Dolphins and the Panthers and how one team got here and how the other team has basically made poor decisions after poor decisions. And they're screwed trying to get better, because how are the Panthers supposed to get better in the offseason when they don't have draft picks? Not key draft picks. Not assets that they can flip to go get a difference maker at wide receiver if they want to. What are they going to do? Now, they had Brian Burns, but they decided, no, we're going to keep Brian Burns, but then not pay him. And you had 2 first-round picks you could have gotten for Brian Burns, theoretically, if you believe the report about the Rams. Those 2 first-round picks would come in really handy to build around Bryce Young. So the Panthers have gone about this in a way that it's like stepping on a rake. It's like stepping on a rake. And I joked about this over the weekend in terms of NC State beating Virginia. There's 3 ways you can win football games. All right. It's the old Herb Sendek remixed. Herb Sendek, the NC State coach, used to joke with you.
Yep.
There's 2 ways to win a basketball game.
He wasn't joking. He was very serious.
There's 2 ways to win a basketball game or win any sporting contest, really. You can score more than the other team. You can prevent the team that you're playing from scoring more than you. But I've added a third. Don't punch yourself in the dick. And repeatedly, or not as often as the other team, and you'll probably walk out with a win. But that's what the Carolina Panthers have been doing. They keep stepping on the rake. It's like the meme where the kid sticks the stick in his bicycle and crashes and then goes, man, I can't believe this happened. Well, you do it to yourself. So
on the positive side, the Panthers scored 27 points.
Okay. By the way, to wrap my point, who's the center of this? What's the one consistency in all of this?
Well, Tepper.
Right.